doors of the Masjid al-Nabawi, there are labels. In fact, now the labels are in Arabic and English, and so it's really nice. And you'll see the Jibreel gate or Bab Jibreel, which indicates the door from which the questioner approached in this hadith. So inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us successful Hajj and Umrah, visits to Medina and Munawwara. Next time you have to put on your bucket list, inshallah, that I have to go see Bab Jibreel. And if you've been, maybe you Google it today and you refresh your memory what it looks like. The door is actually very close to where, kind of the direction of the masjid where the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. This is the door from which Angel Jibreel entered in this hadith. And the hadith is long. We'll read it all inshallah, and we will come back and break it up. I'm sorry, there's a typographical issue here, so I'll just read it from memory. عن عمر أيضا قال بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم إذ طلع علينا شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه منا أحد حتى إذا جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه ووضع كفيه على فخذيه وقال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام. قال الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. قال صدقت. فعجبنا له يسأله ويصدقه. قال فأخبرني عن الإيمان. قال الإيمان أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. قال صدقت. قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان. قال أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. قال فأخبرني عن الساعة. قال ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل. قال فأخبرني عن أماراتها. قال أن تلد الأمة ربتها وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالة رعاء الشاة يتطاولون في البنيان. ثم انطلق ولبثت مليا ثم قال يا عمر أتدري من السائل؟ قلت الله ورسوله أعلم. قال فإنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. رواه مسلم. So this hadith is long, as you can see. We'll take the narration part by part, inshallah. And the narrator is Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu. But this hadith comes in multiple narrations, in multiple collections, because it was witnessed by more than one companion. It is narrated by Abu Hurairah. It is narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. It is narrated by the mother of the believers, Aisha bint Abi Bakr, radiallahu anha. In Bukhari, it is narrated in Muslim, it's narrated in Tirmidhi, among other places. The wording you see in front of you is the wording of Imam Muslim, rahimahullah. And this is because Imam al-Nawawi chose this narration to be the one that he included in his collection, with full knowledge that there were other narrations with slightly complementary or additional meanings, inshallah, as we'll talk about as we go along. In this narration, Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, he says, one day when we were sitting with the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you know, in the other narrations, you'll see, this is kind of an advanced point, inshallah, for those of you continuing your studies of hadith. When you say, بَيْنَمَا نَحْنُ جُلُوسٌ, this word julus, what does it mean? Seated with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In other narrations, it says, عِنْدَ رَسُولٍ, just with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The scholars of hadith, actually, many of them consider this to be what's called ziyadat al-rawi, the addition of the narrator. This is why particularly in hadith studies, of course in all Islamic studies, but particularly in hadith studies, it is absolutely essential that you study with a teacher. Because just studying from a book, especially in hadith, it is very easy to get tripped up because there are things that are understood in the field by convention that are not written in books, right? And the reason this becomes even more dangerous in hadith than Quran is because the Quran, you don't have to deal with multiple narrations, multiple wordings. Obviously the speech is more complex, but when you read the Quran, it doesn't read like the speech of any human being. You read the hadith, it reads like the speech of the Arabs in the 7th century, of the Common Era. So in fact, it was known by convention, and when Imam al-Nawawi put this in, he understood that people would know what these additions were, and they were for like kind of Islamophobic act who claims today mess with concepts like this. When a person, for example, in the Quran or even in the Hadith and in Bukhari, there are expressions among the Arabs that are understood by custom and convention. For example, when the Quran says, in literal translation, you might almost kill yourself over them. And people come all stressed out, oh my God, what's the Prophet ﷺ like so depressed that he was going to commit suicide? Like this is as meaningful as a person coming and reading American literature from 100 years from now and saying, mashallah, what are these barbaric people? They took their pet dogs and they fried them and they ate a dish called hot dogs where they marked them. This is exactly as credible a statement, right? Because to interpret hot dog that way shows a lack of cultural connection and confidence. Because nobody, not only with knowledge of language, but the culture would understand it that way. Similarly in the hadith, for example, the narration of al-Bukhari, where, I'm just summarizing, but there's a similar description where it's almost like might have thrown off the mountain. It's very understood that this is another form of ziyadat al-rawi, an addition, it's an embellishment and a description. And by the way, we have these expressions, what kind of expression can you think of that we do this in English? In American English, particularly. Say again?
I could eat a horse.
I could eat a horse, right? It's the same thing. What else?
Told you a million times.
I told you a million times. I was going to die. I could almost kill you. See? All these expressions, when taken literally or out of context, could become very violent, very problematic, and so on. Now again, I just kind of want to whet your appetite. Don't look at every word and say, oh, that's the ethical rawi, right? No, I mean, you have to study and look at it. And sometimes on some of these issues, there can be a healthy difference of scholarly opinion. In this case, obviously, it just supplements the meaning. They were kind of, in our language, if you're translating this for teenagers, you could almost say we're hanging out with the Prophet ﷺ. In the sense, and I say that to translate the emotion, not to be disrespectful to the Prophet ﷺ, that there are so many elements of Arabic language that indicate how excited Umar ibn Khattab is about describing this issue. He says, بينما نحن جلوس وبينما نحن عند رسول الله. We were with the Prophet ﷺ. Like the Prophet ﷺ himself was hanging out, was in the company, and like we were in his company. Like, and then after that, he says, ذات يوم. ذات in Arabic language is used for like to magnify something, talk about something that's special, to distinguish it, right? And so the day he's describing was a special experience, something that's not the old. On this special day, everything in the language indicates how Umar ibn Khattab valued and loved the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also how this was a very special, unique experience. On this day, there appeared from us a man dressed in extremely white white clothes, with very dark hair, no traces of travel were visible upon him, nor did anyone from us know. These four descriptions, very white clothes, very dark hair, no effects of travel upon him, and none of us knew him. I want you, inshallah, to turn to a group of about, whatever's comfortable, 5, 7 people, and I want you to list and extract as many lessons from just these four things as you can. This is going to be a challenging exercise. At first, it seems like just description. There are a lot of lessons hiding in these four descriptions. I want you to really think, try to paint the picture. Think about how many people are there, what's being communicated within the lines. It's going to challenge you a little bit. Work together, inshallah, on these four descriptions. And we'll come together in about 6 minutes, inshallah. One of you in the group list them so that you can share them, inshallah. Everybody understand what we're doing?
You got it, Contra?
Hello. I mean, the obvious is like, oh, he's a traveler. But they don't know.
It's working?
It's working.
Okay, yeah, alhamdulillah. Basically, a little bit clearer. I'm gonna see if I can get some feedback on that.
Pardon?
I'm gonna see if I can get some feedback.
Okay, your wife is on there, right?
She should be. I'm gonna see.
Okay. Is her name Rom, like R-H-O-M? Okay.
Sophia.
I thought so.
Good. I mean, I think the answer's kind of obvious. He's a traveler. They don't know him. So, like, how is he here without any marks of travel on him?
Right.
So,
He's
like,
wearing all white, very clean.
it should be dirty because it's another area. It's not true.
He comes up directly to the Prophet. He's so confident.
Yeah. Black hair indicates that, like, he's not old, he's young, or he's like.
What's up?
Or why did you feel late, man? Why did you feel late, man? Why are you so tired?
I don't know. I'm not tired. How's your family?
They're good. What about yours?
They're good.
And your mom?
Alhamdulillah.
Hello.
Have you heard back from any more schools?
What?
You heard from any more schools?
Nah, man. Just waiting. Bro, you know what? I wanted school to make like something like waiting for interviews or like that. I think it's so stupid, man.
Ridiculous. Yo, let's drive past your garage. You guys have those bird chargers.
Oh, yeah. We get like 20. We have 40.
How much?
For chargers or birds?
You charge, how many do you have?
Yeah, during the hurricane, we had 40.
How do you have that many?
I got some 18 myself.
I ordered some chargers, like I ordered 5. I haven't gotten mine yet.
We have about 40.
Yeah.
So we got some from China. Yeah, like from China.
So you bought them from China?
Yeah. And then like I ordered some from Lime and Bird.
Yeah.
My brother ordered from Lime and Bird.
They use the same charger? He's smart. He's smart. He's smart. You don't look smart, but you're smart.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Bro, we were charging 40.
Hey,
We had 40 in our
it's ridiculous, man.
Dude, you know how much I pay now?
$5
Per day.
Yeah.
It was like $35 a month.
Yeah.
It was pretty solid, man. On the low.
Crazy.
What? It's harder and harder to find it. How many people are doing it?
Yeah. The market's saturated.
Have you done it?
I haven't got my charger yet.
I think live might be easier.
I'm gonna try live.
Huh?
I'm gonna try live.
I went live though. It's like you can't connect them to state. Like no one knows that. Very people know this, but you can't connect them on state campus. You have to be in downtown line.
Okay. Live
So
or
that's like if you try right now to do whatever, it'll be like you can't see them. And you're confused about all this. I'm not working.
yeah.
Like if you go downtown, that can't work.
Just ride them to downtown. Just ride them to downtown.
That good money won't
What?
Who's that?
That's Joe Biden.
Come back together, inshallah. One lesson. One lesson. What is the lesson to share? One lesson from the lessons we discussed. Don't tell me all this talking, there's no lessons. You guys weren't talking about the latest news or something.
So the fact that nobody knows him, it's a pretty tight community. Everybody knows each other.
Now, Jazakumullah khairan. So when you look at the Masjid Nabawi today, with, you know, like you could extend it to the white tiles, it's about the size of the whole city of Medina Munawwara at the time of the Prophet. So keep that in mind. The Masjid today is the size of the whole city at the time of the Prophet. So it's kind of like a desert town. It's definitely not a big city like the Roman city and so on. You're talking maybe a couple thousand people. And so people really knew each other. Everybody knew everybody, right? Not just the Abu Bakr of the world, who knew people's genealogy and family and so on. At least people would see each other. A lot of people had good familiarity with who else was there. And even just 100-ish years ago, Al-Medina in the early 1900s, and for many hundred years before that, was gated. Not at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but sometime after him, the whole city was surrounded by a fence for protection and a gate. So actually, if you arrive in Al-Medina Munawwara at night, you have to camp outside. You have to wait till the morning, because the gate was not staffed all day and night. So nighttime arrivals would have to camp until the gate would be open and protected during the day. And so this is all very, very important. Why are the companions, before we leave this point, why are the companions concerned about knowing everyone?
For the safeguard.
One is to protect the Prophet ﷺ, because there were 9 assassination attempts on him. Obviously Allah protects him, but they're doing their part from the asbab. Another reason is, a lot of people don't talk about this hadith, very important point. Community. You want to apply part of this hadith, especially if you're a person that's praying in the masjid or coming Jumu'ah, and you spot somebody, don't wait really take it on your shoulder, walk up to the person, and ask them, mashallah, I'm very happy to meet you. See, softly, and they make them feel like an outsider, but maybe they're traveling, maybe they're passing through the city. It just takes one person to welcome them, make them, appreciate their presence, and that comes off as a welcoming of the entire community. Right? And so, very, very important lesson from this hadith that Umar ibn al-Khattab noticed before this man spoke that he was not from the people that were known, right? And obviously in this case it was Prophet speaking, but you could imagine in our cases how we apply it to welcome and check with people, can I help you, all that kind of stuff. Other lesson. Other lesson.
So they're kind of juxtaposing factors, so the very white clothing contradicts the no traces of journey, because if somebody's coming from far away, you expect them to be very dirty because it's desert, and that just completely contradicts that. And then we were saying that it's somebody who cares about their appearance because you dress for success. So regardless of the fact that they didn't know him, he was coming to teach about their religion, so he clearly has to have a very good presence about that.
Okay, excellent. A lot of good points. Let's stay on this point of clothing for a moment, right? So he appeared clean and presentable, right? In order for him to clean, if he's not from here and he appears that clean and presentable, what would have had to happen? How it had to have happened?
You would have to change the clothing.
You would have had to have extra clothing or chain. There's no first class Delta Airlines ticket, right? They're walking through a desert, they get dust, get picked up and so on. So people do that. There's another few hidden lessons here. I don't want you to miss them. Okay, just on the clothing.
I think even the people who were there, even if they were wearing a white cloth, it may not have been as white as this person, because they were generally poor and they would wear whatever they could find, maybe clean it up, but even then it would not be as white as this person.
Absolutely. So this stood out. One of the reasons this stood out, most of the Sahaba were very poor, and a lot of them only had one pair. From the hadith of the Bedouin man that urinates in the masjid, one of the fiqh lessons when people extracted reasons why the Prophet ﷺ did not allow his companions to stop him from doing this act, why he let a lesser haram go, if you will, one of the reasons was because many of the companions have only one pair of clothes. And so if if filth comes on them, that's your whole day is gone. You gotta go home, wash the clothes, there's no electric or gas dryer. Like you have to wait at home for a whole day while those clothes. A lot of companions, not all, some companions were very rich, some companions had a lot of blessings, but many of the companions had a tough physical life, were very poor, only had one pair of clothes. So this clothes was very striking in many respects, among them that. Okay, what else? How about the clothing?
They showed how much respect he had for the person that he was coming to meet the Prophet, so he took that time to make sure he was presentable.
Jazakallah khairan. So from this, ulama extract one of the adab and etiquettes of the student of knowledge and the seeker of knowledge, which is to have a very proper and clean presentation. Have good, and you really should pay attention to this. If you're going to go give a speech about Islam, like iron your clothes or press them, make sure they're clean, be cognizant. All this stuff is part of our deen. It's not just like, pay a lot of attention to those things, because those adab, or those etiquettes and manners, are what show before you speak. In fact, Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, alayhi rahmatullah, great Syrian scholar of the 20th century, of particular hadith and other fields, he writes in his book, Islamic Manners, fantastic book, exceptional English translation. I highly recommend that you read it multiple times. It's not very long. Islamic Manners. And he writes that one of the importance of these manners are because of what it shows. It is what shows of the deen before you speak or act. In other words, the first message that's coming to a person is these etiquettes and so on, which people are ascribing to deen potentially, right? And Islam, before you ever speak. And now, in modern psychology research, there's all this research about how quickly people form first impressions, how people read micro expressions on the face, right? Which are universal, even though there's different cultural differences between how expressive somebody is, how covered somebody is, so you can't read all their body language as well. The micro expressions that come on face that show emotion are universal in humanity. And so subconsciously, people are picking up on all these signals, down to a person's appearance, a person's odor, a person's cleanliness, a person's attention to these details. That's going to come across before we ever say a single word. Now, it's another lesson about clothes. So much about clothes, right? This is very subtle. I don't want you to miss it. Now, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he noticed that the clothes is different in terms of its whiteness, its cleanliness. Did he notice the clothes itself? What does he have on?
Complete dress.
It's a complete dress, but also there's no commentary like it's pardon me, like an alien outfit or something, right? Or even like a Roman dress or a Byzantine dress. There's no commentary, meaning that Angel Jibreel, his clothes fit in the decent standards of the Arabs. First, actually, graduate thesis in Al-Azhar University in Cairo was about the role of custom and law in Islamic law, right? And it's a deep topic. I'm trying to summarize it for you because custom cannot overcome what's halal and haram. But even on this issue, ulama have extracted from this hadith points about being relatable and connectable to the people that you're on, as long as it's in what is halal. Ibn Taymiyyah actually makes the point that Muslims living in non-Muslim lands, his scholarly opinion, should dress in the dress of those people as long as it is halal, for purposes of being more relatable for da'wah and for purposes of protection also, right? And so this is a wide discussion. I'm just introducing you to some of the opinions, right? There's other opinions, but certainly from this, it is extracted that Angel Jibreel is commanded, and in this case, he came not in a dress of the angel. Remember that other times he comes in his angel form, or comes in an appearance to the Prophet ﷺ that is entirely not human. So it is noteworthy here that not only he is human in form, clearly he looks distinguished and different, but his clothes in their form are not distinguishable from what Arabs wear in decency. In space decency, right? Because sometimes the Arabs had some indecent or improper clothes. Obviously, that's not allowed. But that's important to know here too. Other lessons about these four points.
His hair was also not messed up.
That's right. His hair was very
clean.
kind of
because
prophet.
it's dust and people traveling there must be a dusted.
So
word explains that it was really dark hair.
No.
Dust on the hair.
You talked about how the hair was very dark and there was no description of sand or anything, because that would have been a description of someone working in the desert or something.
No.
So it was very dark.
So you talking about the hair, and we thought it was a sign of his youthfulness. It was not old.
That's a good point. Inshallah, I've never encountered that point. That's a very unique reflection, inshallah. Yeah, very nice. A sign maybe of his youthfulness and an indication of age.
There's a special type of messenger. There must be a very special message to follow.
Okay, special type of messenger must be a special message to follow. So they noticed something was definitely very different. And would it be safe to say that it grabbed their attention for what was to follow? Right? So notice the companions all paid attention for what was to follow.
Yeah, this mentioned that they actually noticed it's not from there, that it must be on the journey. That shows that if we are traveling to meet the people, let's prepare to get cleaned up before we appear to them.
No. Jazakallah khair. There's a point here.
Also, we discussed it, we came up with, he must have been of high status higher than the norm of the community.
No. Jazakallah khairan. So his status and his stature are even different from the rest of the people.
Black hair like allows see more of a contrast between the white clothing and the hair. So like if
The narrator felt it necessary to convey all these details even before the person speaks talking. I mean, the hadith could have begun, a person appeared before Prophet Muhammad and started asking questions. But there are a lot of details here, and even the next sentence it goes on to say he sat down close to the Prophet and rested his knees. And not just the narrator felt it necessary to convey that, but the people who are documenting this felt that this was a very essential part of the hadith.
No.
I think there's a lot of lesson there.
Really important lesson. I'll take one comment and then we'll tie it up.
Your appearance or your clothes benefits you before you sit.
No. Jazakallah khairan. And so taking, yes,
I think what was more impressive to the Sahaba is when they noticed this man had the stature and the status to go and lay his knees over the prophets, that the Sahaba themselves could not have done so. The closeness of the Sahaba could not have been that close to him and questioned the Prophet, certain things like that. So therefore, they will have, they're impressed. Who is this person who could ask the Prophet these kind of questions? You know, we cannot even ask him this question.
No. Jazakallah khairan. So if we take kind of a synopsis on several of these points, and this is a really much longer discussion, but you guys are doing amazing, mashallah. Jazakallah khairan for really engaging this matter. One of the key things here to notice about the narrator, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, is the importance of the caller being reliable and understanding his surroundings. So notice how much we're extracting from Angel Jibreel in the form of a man, in terms of his presence, his clothing, and so on. We'll come back to that in a moment. Also notice the narrator. Angel Jibreel hasn't said anything yet. And notice Umar ibn al-Khattab, it's not like, you know, he would come, I mean, do you think he knew how important this whole episode would be? You see what I'm saying? It's like, oh God, I wish I took notes and went back and I should have been falling asleep in class. No, all of this detail, he picked up on it not knowing, I mean, obviously something different is going on. How many people come into the Prophet ﷺ? I mean, he gets heckled in khutab, people come out and, you know, yell, you know, every once in a while there's somebody kind of rough manner doing something different. Not all of these end up to be these universal principles or as an angel or something, sometimes just a person. But he's noticing all of this, which is a really important lesson, that the believer, the Muslim, the caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is observant on top of things, skilled, notices the environment, not just what somebody says, not waiting for something to wake us up from our slumber. There's really, really active observation taken in so much about the environment. And then with Angel Jibreel, I'm summarizing a longer discussion, but I recommend you see what he does in two separate areas. There are parts where he models the adab and the etiquettes and behavior of a student of knowledge. Cleanliness, the way he asks questions, the respect he shows to the teacher, the inquisitiveness. He's the one that ends the gathering, not the Prophet ﷺ. Ulama mentioned it is the right of the student to be able to have the opportunity to ask about the deen, right? But also there are other things that we should understand are specific to his status as Angel Jibreel and are used essentially as perhaps attention devices, right? So when he comes, he calls out, Ya Muhammad, right? This is not allowed for a Muslim, it's makruh for a Muslim to call for the Prophet ﷺ just as he calls out to another person, right? It should be addressed by his title. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, overwhelming in the Quran, addresses him by his title, right? The Prophet of Allah or the Messenger of Allah. So here we understand also there's some uniqueness to Angel, you know, to this incident. It's coming as and it's grabbing that attention, right? And then when he comes in, actually, the door, it is said that he, you know, in the narration of At-Tirmidhi, he calls out to the Prophet ﷺ and asks that he come closer, and eventually he comes and sits in front of the Prophet ﷺ and leans his knees to his knees. In this narration, it says, what does he do with his hands? Put his hands on his thighs. It's a pronoun. So in this narration, it could be the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ, or it could be the thighs of the questioner, right? So it could be like this, right? Which is still a very intimate sitting, right? They're sitting right in front of each other. Or it could be like this, which is like super, like intimate and different, right? And in a sense that also, again, has both pieces to it. It has both pieces to it. That there's that humility and that closeness between the student-teacher relationship. At the same time, there's some uniqueness to it, right? Because the companions are like, who's this person that's calling the Prophet by his first name, plops right in front of him, puts his hands on his thighs. As comes in other narrations, it specifies the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ, and Allah knows best. But it is certainly a valid, and some people say, the stronger interpretation. So keep that in mind. There's so much here about the necessity of adab, the importance of etiquette, and in fact, this is such a huge part of our deen. And there's also some unique aspects to the role of Angel Jibreel that is obviously attracting the attention of everyone for this essential and important conversation. Because ultimately it's not a conversation for him, it's affirming the message of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And obviously also for later generations, summing up all of Islam. Okay? Questions?
So here we talked about safety being one of the major concerns of the companions. Now all the description that you just went through show that this person is unknown, he's so close, and he's getting close, and he's doing things which are very abnormal. But I don't see any companion kind of jumping in and interrupting. Is that also part of the adab that since Rasulullah is sitting there, he's not saying or asking for help, they are just held back, or they are in the state of inaction because they are in the awe of what's going on? That's kind of, you would think that Umar or other companions would have jumped in to say, no, we need to have some distance because we don't know who you are.
No. So there's nothing explicitly meant, but there's several things we extract indirectly from the hadith. Great question, very observant. But one thing is, in other narrations, there's an indication that he's specifically asking the Prophet ﷺ for permission to approach, and the Prophet is granting him, right? He's not just popping in front of him, right? That comes explicitly in some of the other narrations. Also, there's no indication that he's armed, right? And so it's common, right, in the time that a person traveling through the desert is going to have a sword around there, or a bow or something around their waist, and that's not mentioned at all in the description, right? And so a person's literally coming in a white thobe, if you will, like, although they could be physically dangerous, be quickly overpowered by everybody else out there if they had nefarious intention. So this could have been some of the thought of the companions. But definitely, it's important to note that in other narrations, the Prophet ﷺ explicitly, he asks and the Prophet grants him permission. So in those types of situations, the companions recognize they may not know how everything's going on, but they trust the Prophet ﷺ.
I like what you just mentioned. So could that be a sign of, also a sign of traveling? Travel usually had some kind of weapon with them?
It could be, it's not mentioned explicitly, but it could be something we infer. It might be expected that Omar, or again, this was mentioned by many narrators, none of which mention this description. And so it's very likely that he was not, dressed. In many ways, he does not look like a traveler, right? And remember, during this time, even a man on his own, very uncommon for them to travel in the desert alone because there's bandits and so on. I mean, except like Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib and Umar ibn al-Khattab, like really powerful. Most people travel in groups, certainly women and men typically travel in groups due to safety. Any other questions? Okay. So, going back to the narration, right? In this intimate position now, he asks questions. And the first question he asks in this narration, he says, O Muhammad, inform me about al-Islam. Tell me about Islam. Now, when you look at this answer, is it an answer to the question, or is it different from what you were expecting? He says, Islam is what? That you make the shahada, testify there's no one worthy of worship but Allah and that Muhammad ﷺ is his messenger, establish prayer, give the alms, mandatory alms, fast Ramadan, and make Hajj to the sacred house if you're able to. Could you have imagined a different answer?
No.
Have you read a different answer when somebody's been asked about Islam?
Yes.
Kind of leading you in a certain direction.
Yes, it means submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Islam means
Submission.
submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I look up in an Islamic studies textbook and I look up Ta'rif al-Islam, the definition of Islam, will I ever see this as the definition of the term Islam? No. Why?
If you look at the back question, it's just like a short definition.
Say again?
Like, if you just look up the word Islam, like, it's just like a word. So you can't have, like, so many, like, you know, like, this is like 5 pillars of it.
Okay, what else?
I think because that definition is already asked by the Sahaba, but no one has asked about Arkan Islam.
Okay.
So Jibreel came to ask questions that no one would think about.
Okay, good.
Generally, when they use Islam, it is the definition of Islam when you ask what is Islam. But he's asking, inform me, so it is describing Islam.
Okay, excellent. So Prophet ﷺ did not respond with a definition per se, but a description of the pillars and arkan al-Islam, right? What could be some of the wisdom behind this approach?
There could be some other actions that the companions might be doing in addition to these 5 things, and they might have thought that all of this thing is the basic definition of Islam. But Rasulullah is qualifying to say these are the 5 major pillars or arkan you mentioned.
Okay.
The question is verifying knowledge, not that he's asking for knowledge. I mean, he already knows, he's only verifying the answer.
We're talking about Angel Jibreel as the questioner, okay? Yes.
So I think the way the Prophet ﷺ answered the question, he just pretty much explained the things that you have to believe in, you have to have to be Muslim. That if you have these 5 things, you're Muslim. That's Islam. As opposed to the way, like, you know, me and somebody else would just answer, you know, some non-Muslim they ask you about Islam, you go into like, no, it's just a submission, it's doing this, and you just go into a lot of things they don't understand, right? So basically, it's just very simple and straightforward. That if you have these 5 things, you're Muslim. That's it.
Okay. Ahmadine.
So actions are very important, not just belief alone.
Okay, so that's really important, this issue of actions. We're going to go back to that. Sister Zainab?
Sorry, just like that. I didn't mean to say them. So I know, like, as a teacher, when I'm like, if I ask a question of a student, sometimes I'll form it in a way where it's like I need them to give me a certain response. So like I'll have it leading to like my answer I'm looking for. But this one, it's not just saying like, what does Islam mean, or like, what is Islam? Like, it's not actually a question. It's more of like a command statement where it's saying inform me about. So then it's kind of in the way where the whoever's answering has to tell like deeper of where they're coming from. Like they can put more of like their heart into it. Like, you know, where their like own perspective comes out, where it's not more of like a leading statement.
Okay.
So he's giving a very practical answer rather than a theoretical answer. He could go about expanding on, you know, the theory behind Islam and all this other stuff. But if you give a straightforward practical answer, people are more likely to understand.
I'm thinking that he's missing the core and the heart.
Okay.
He's looking at his audience before he responds. Before his response.
Okay, so being cognizant of flow, take one more.
I think it's the Madani Hadith. So now we're coming away from that definition of Islam where it was all like justice and peace that it was in the Meccan period, and now it's going more towards the actions and the things that are required by Islam.
Okay, so if we take, you guys got everything, but now we have to put a big bow around it, right? So many lessons here. Number one, Angel Jibreel asked for a description of Islam, not necessarily a definition. Mentioned by several people, the awareness of speaking, even there's a hadith whose meaning is to address people according to their level and capacity. The Prophet ﷺ is speaking to kind of all people. Not everybody has the opportunity to do tons of, degrees and education. So a lot of people are working from a young age. Some people, will interact with this. Arabic is not their first language. All these people have to be relating to this hadith. And so while there's other ways to answer, the Prophet ﷺ perhaps chose the best way to answer this question as a description that was relatable to people. Moreover, rather than an abstract description, he gave rather than an abstract definition, he gave a practical description. Rather than an abstract definition, he gave a practical description. Establish these, do these, you will build up that Islam, right? Other things are part of Islam, right? Good character, goodness to parents, and so on. But this forms an arkan, or that which is relied upon or built upon for al-Islam. Also, in terms of a teaching device, here we see Angel Jibreel asking a question to which he already knows the answer. So this is an important da'wah and teaching tip. Sometimes a question is asked to assert, rephrase, reaffirm, right, as a teaching device. Questions can be very, very useful. And here Angel Jibreel is asking a question to which he already knows the answer, to assert or affirm the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Interestingly, this point was mentioned in passing. I don't want it to be missed. Shahada, testimony of faith, is it an action or a belief? Both. It's both. You have to say it. Everybody agree it's both?
Yes.
I don't. Just a belief. Any other opinions?
It's both.
True. And so on the details of this, there are differences among different sects of Islam. But essentially, shahada is an action that reflects a belief. Okay? Shahada. Not talking about Iman. Shahada, the testimony of faith, is an action which reflects a belief. Okay? But that you testify, that you say. Okay? Again, there's exceptions. Somebody is under threat, only says it in private, doesn't declare it in public. That's all discussed in details in the fiqh works. We don't want to get lost on that tangent. As an idea, it is an action. The Prophet ﷺ is giving Islamic practice, things that you do, that we repeat and say and re-examine this every day. So many times in salah, so many times in dhikr, we keep making the shahada over and over. A person enters in Islam, no secret dance, no secret club that you have to register for, pay your initiation fees. This shahada is so powerful, it takes you in, but then it's always a journey, because as you repeat it, reaffirm it, inshallah, what rolls off the tongue permeates the heart, right? But all of these are actions. A salah also, people can do a salah, somebody has presence and khushu', somebody doesn't. But in its essence, it is an action reflecting a state of mind, okay, or a state of belief. And so, overall, this pillar of al-Islam moves us to have proper and appropriate practice of our religion. It is the outward manifestation of our religion. Let me just show you this diagram because I think it will help. Okay? If this thing gets to work. So this is one of the very powerful categorizations of Islam extracted from this hadith. The three major dimensions of al-Islam. Think about this Islam as capital I, being the overall complete deen and religion. Think about this Islam as lowercase I, if you will, the element of practice, outward practice of the deen. So all of these things are descriptions of outward practices of al-Islam. Again, there's other things in this hadith that are part of al-Islam. Talked about adab, come the signs of the Day of Judgment. But these three dimensions are the three big ones that are mentioned by the questioning of Angel Jibreel and the answers of the Prophet ﷺ. So this Islam, lowercase I, is a dimension of practice, okay? Actions. Reflect how we do. So after this, again, we can go a lot longer on this, but I want to give an overall view of the hadith, okay? The Angel Jibreel reacts how? He says, you've spoken the truth. And now all of a sudden, the companions are like, whoa. Right? He says, فَعَجِبْنَا, we were shocked. Then he asks him, and then tells him he's right. They were astonished and shocked that the man would ask the Prophet ﷺ and then tell him he was right. But the questioner continued, inform me about Iman, belief. And the Prophet ﷺ here responded with what? The definition of an Iman? What did he respond with?
The tenets of
The articles of Iman, the 6 articles of Al-Iman, okay? And he talked about belief in Allah, angels, the books and scriptures, messengers, last day and accountability, and the qadr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine decree, and the good and evil that are allowed to exist in this creation and on earth. Obviously, this is the subject of entire courses, just exploring these 6. There are good introductory works that explain it. The best long-form work that I know of in English, that's translated into English, for those of you doing detailed research on any of these areas, is the series by Dr. Omar Suleiman al-Ashqar, A-S-H-Q-A-R. If some of you, for example, in your colleges or something, you're doing an in-depth piece on Qadar or something like that, and you're looking for a classical Islamic source that will supplement your referencing and resources, that is one of the good ones in English, but it's not where I recommend starting because it's a volume for each pillar. There are more accessible and shorter introductions or introductory studies, okay? But these 6 pillars of Al-Iman are really descriptions of Iman, because many people consider that Iman cannot really be defined in some dictionary sense, right? It's that some scholars have stated that it is what is established in the heart and confirmed through action, right? And some have said, it's said that focus on the issue of tasdeeq, or affirming the veracity, the validity of of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm going to very particularly not go on that long tangent and stay true to the description of this hadith. This is how the Prophet ﷺ discussed al-Iman here. Certainly there are other hadith where we explore it from other angles. The Prophet ﷺ here described it in this way, focused on the pillars and the articles of al-Iman. This is an area that I think Muslims in the West, and especially in academia, this is my opinion, please evaluate it, consider it for yourself, question me about it, but I think in da'wah, Muslims make very big mistakes in this area and get intimidated. In that, our deen is based on a system of thinking, of understanding, okay? You don't have to believe it to understand it. You don't have to accept it off the system and try to describe Islamic outcomes using the thinking of Western philosophy or science and philosophy of science or whatever. And I personally think this is a big mistake. So when we say belief in Allah, belief in God, there is a ton of the Quran devoted to a description of who Allah is and who Allah is not. Attributes that are befitting of Him and claims that are unbefitting of Him. The authenticity of the message, the necessity of submission, the authority of the Almighty to be obeyed and worshipped. All of these things are big themes in the Quran. You don't have to be Muslim to talk about them. But when I start reverse interpreting, Salah 5 times a day is like Fajr, makes you like more energetic, right? Than praying at 8 a.m., right? And fasting is good for the digestive system, and it makes you lose weight. Or whatever, I'm picking easier ones, right? But some people will go about these convoluted, long descriptions to try to prove Islam from outside of Islamic thinking. You want to research, you want to do supplementary work, that's fine. But I personally think that in our own belief and in our da'wah, we have to understand how the system fits together. Right? I have no doubt that worshiping Allah brings emotional benefits, brings health benefits, brings better family outcomes, brings this. But Allah didn't promise that you're going to have a good life by worshiping. He promised you're going to have a good akhirah. Right? And then this life, Allah gives it to whom He loves, Allah gives it to whom He doesn't love. This life is neither a place of reward for the good, nor a place of accountability for the evil. Some tyrants have horrible, ugly, ghastly deaths, and some die on a deathbed and will have to be answered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, the way Allah's universe works is complex. The sunnah of Allah is not based on my little mind reverse engineering of a couple points here and there. You see what I'm saying? So understanding these in depth is important. That doesn't mean when you're writing a scientific paper, you're not going to use the angels as evidence, right? You just recognize that I'm using the principles of whatever, biology, physics, this field, that field, historical study, and you're deriving conclusions based on that field of study. But when you come back to your overall life, we have to build Islamic literacy so we understand how our deen fits together. I really think this is one of the biggest challenges of our time, one of the biggest passions for me personally. And I think in our times there is nothing more honorable or more important than walking Muslims back from the cliff. A lot of Muslims are losing their deen, abandoning their deen, because they're intimidated and they don't understand how this all fits together, right? And I don't want that to be lost on you or on me in this hadith, right? We're talking about dimensions and we're extracting lessons that keep all these dimensions healthy, all right? Know how to act, have good adab, interact with people correctly. Doesn't matter if Muslim, non-Muslim, family, not family, and so on. Know how to behave. Keep your practice and your outward manifestation correct. And these are the 5 things that you build it on. But by the way, like, any of you live in a house with like 5 pillars and nothing else, right? So there's Islam that's built on this, right? Being good to parents, working hard, seeking knowledge. All this is part of Islam, it's part of the outward manifestation. But these are the pillars. Don't go become a scholar. You're not focusing, your 5 prayers are not in order, or at least you're working to get there, right? A lot of Muslims today, it's surprising to you. There is movement in the numbers, right? Pew Research, Dr. Ihsan Bagby, ISPU, a couple organizations have done studies. For example, this study finds about between 10 and 20% of Muslims pray 5 times a day. But almost 80% of Muslims in the survey do what? Fast Ramadan. You see, so instead of keeping my Islamic practice together as a whole, it's like there's a cultural belonging, but not that transformative practices bring my whole life together. We want to focus on these five because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, emphasized them. Similarly, al-Iman, okay? We talked about these 6 articles, be a long discussion. I'm purposely not going to go very, very deep because aspects of it will come. And now it's time to throw you in the deep end, inshallah. So we're going to have a quick case study, and then we'll take some questions and finish the hadith. So this case study is challenging. Don't leave during this case study. I don't want to be responsible for like Iman crisis, right? So I'll take this in the next couple minutes here, inshallah. This case study is about 2 Muslims in your community's youth group, Ahmad and Bilal, who approach you with a dispute. Ahmad has come to the conclusion that many Muslims profess faith, Iman, but are in fact kuffar, or disbelievers. Based on a hadith such as, and he cites these 2. Okay? لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That none of you, just raw translation, believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. In this hadith, in translation, the fornicator does not fornicate while he is a believer. And the thief does not steal when he is stealing while he is a believer. And the alcoholic does not drink alcohol while he's drinking, while he's a believer. Okay? You see here, mu'min, believer. Based on this, Ahmad comes to the conclusion that there's a lot of Muslims that are disbelievers. People that drink, people that fornicate, people that don't, wish for others well, not believers. But Bilal says you should take a person for what they say. If they say they're Muslim, then they're Muslim. And so Ahmad and Bilal approach you to mediate their dispute. Do you agree with Ahmad? Do you agree with Bilal? And why? And don't leave in the next 5 minutes. Any questions on this? It's a very challenging case study. Take it seriously. Try to evidence your claims. Any questions? Okay, get together. Let's try to figure it out.
Hi, Kash, come with the answer. Ready. You're Ahmed Bilal. I feel like this is us. Wait. Why do I get to be Ahmed? Do I like a hypocrite? You said it was a hypocrite. What? I never said that. I don't know whose phone's more cracked, yours or mine. Mine. Your phone not cracked. I cracked my camera. It looks fine to me.
The question is, that's what the deep is going into is the distinction. Do you believe in that plan? Okay, Muslim. The question is, either transpose it to a different thing. One is belief and one is okay, what is Muslim? What is Iman? Big eyes, Islam, or little eyes?
So say because they had that belief, they're Muslim.
They're Muslim. Even if they're Muslim, why question in English is if you're Muslim. These two hadith are talking about. Say that we don't have because if we don't do the other environment.
Going back to here, that's practice of pain, right? No, I think we're on the right track.
From there. There.
You're a bad Muslim.
Can we take a picture like right now of ladies?
I took one already.
You did?
Yeah.
Was I in it?
Probably not.
Good.
Wait.
That's not the.
Yeah. There's like a lot more people that are like sitting down too. Thank you.
It's very tricky though.
kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. So Ahmed is really just kind of running with that hadith and making people based off of very small evidence. To really say somebody's not Muslim, there has to be quite a large condition put on that for us to be able to say that. Because a person can be sinning and still be a Muslim as long as they recognize it's a sin, and even then there's categories. Same thing on the vice versa. You know, a person can claim they're Muslim, but if they're denying or adding major fundamental parts of Islam that are or are not there, then that's also taking that outside the fold of Islam.
Okay. Very good. Okay, well done, man. He said that to summarize, Ahmed and Bilal seem to be on opposite sides of the spectrum. We need to recognize for a person to be outside of the fold of Islam, there's many conditions that have to be fulfilled. A person on that, Bilal's side of the spectrum could be somebody who claims but outwardly rejects a lot of Islam. And on the other hand, you could have the similar thing on the other side. Could be a person that believes in their hearts but is struggling. So just as a summary of what he said.
We had a thought that, actually not in a judgmental tone or perspective, but we believe that Ahmed might be projecting some negativity due to internal struggles. I think we do that a lot. That as individuals we do that a lot. We apply these commands from the Deen to our community or to others rather than like looking inside. So I feel like the dialogue in the community when we have these conversations should start to turn around, not in a judgmental way, but in a helpful and supportive way to ask, is there a resource I can get you, or is there something that is there a way that I can help to address and apply this application of the Deen? And then also we're thinking about the use of this hadith that we've been discussing today, just to allow him to come back to, and also do that, to come back to the fact that there are these core pieces of the practice of Islam, and so you have to be able to apply that. And it's just really interesting that these pieces, we kind of were curious whether, that of course the Prophet Muhammad has these hadith for the ummah, but usually first it has to be applied to yourself, so it's just really important to bring that perspective back up when having these dialogues.
Good points. I would like to point out, obviously, that, so among other points that was shared, that maybe Ahmed is projecting some aspects of negativity, that we should look inwardly and apply these on ourselves and for others. Obviously, it's a multi-dimensional thing. If we're going through a case study on coaching or helping these people, that we would not want to project that assumption. We would want to explore it in a very indirect way, because that assumption can be true in many cases, can be very false in many cases. But in the cases it's true, nobody's going to appreciate it kind of being thrown at them unless you have that strength. So that's a really important complementary discussion. I will say that this is very realistic. I have encountered a lot of people that think on one side of the spectrum or the other. I will say that historically, especially those of you that have studied Islamic history or sects, or honestly sects of other religions, should recognize that this issue of takfir is behind a lot of bloodshed historically, right? Because people essentially use it as a roundabout religious justification to otherize somebody and then make it okay in their mind, although it's not okay to kill them or take their property or whatever, right? This is a very serious topic. For today, this is not an easy case study. This is very advanced. And I'm going to push you out of love and respect for you to evidence your claims, to prove it. Why is this not compelling and convincing? So I'll come here and then there. Again, you don't have to architect the whole argument. Let's just see if we can add one point after one point and come to a conclusion.
What he discussed here was, we were very much in the area with Bilal, that yes, we have to give whoever says that he's a Muslim, just give them the benefit of the doubt and let him be here not to judge. And one of the things that came up in our discussion were otherizing of the people I'm not sure it's wise to name any groups, but otherizing of the Shia or otherizing of Ahmadis and just saying that they are not Muslims because they say this or they do that. So people very much with Bilal, leave everybody, let them practice as much as they are able to in the moment, and they say Muslim, believe that they are Muslim.
Okay, great points. With your permission, inshallah, all these points I'm going to kind of push back on you and try to grow. So a question might be, all right, we want to be non-judgmental, we want to be respectful of people, but some Islamic regulations are built on a person's Islamic status or not. So if my son or daughter is getting married, or your brother or sister is getting married, is that sufficient for that person to be Muslim? If they just claim to be Muslim, does that mean that marriage goes? Inheritance rights, property rights? This might be a way we extend that thought, even while keeping that same thought of we don't want to be judgmental or push people or degrade people, but this has Islamic legal consequences. How do we deal with that? We'll just get good building. So go ahead.
To respond to what you just said, I think that when it comes down to something like marriage, it's really up to the person and how they view their level of being and what they would want as a level of being in their spouse, right? So in that, and then I would probably agree with Bilal also, just based on the hadith or the story where Ihsan bin Zayd was in a battle and his enemy dropped his sword and immediately said the shahada. And that's like a clear cut, like obviously he was saying the shahada to get out of being killed. Ihsan bin Zayd killed him, but the Prophet said, did you look inside his heart?
Okay. So powerful story. Jazakallah khairan. Who can build on this line of thought? Or an additional one? Go ahead.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate for Ahmed. So he's claiming that if you profess faith, you claim you believe in Shahada. Well, what about the sixth person, what about Ihsan? So if you don't compile on that, you're capitalized Muslim. So are you Muslim or are you not?
Okay. Important question.
It's not clear to me that we have been given the authority to declare anyone Muslim or non-Muslim. We need to reach a conclusion whether the person we are dealing with at a personal level is a Muslim or not. But do we need to make an announcement on Twitter that we have made that conclusion?
Okay.
So I just wanted to touch base on otherizing. So I feel like Allah otherizes believers versus non-believers. So if you're, like, from our earlier discussion, if actions reflecting your belief, then you make a conscious choice whether you're going to get up for Fajr, not get up for Fajr, and disbelief in that moment that you didn't get up, versus you do believe and then you followed it up with your actions.
Okay, so bring some of this together, and I want to particularly, with respect for everyone, I want to particularly prioritize those that we may not have heard from in the discussion so far. If Islam is kind of in the heart of the believer, and anything goes, then what is Islam? If it means everything to everyone, or anything to anyone. When you come to this mosque, and you ask me a question, or ask a religious authority or imam or whatever, do you want me to answer based on my male biases, or my personal preferences, or what I read in my favorite book, or the shuyukh that I particularly lean to in my personal practice? Or do you want the expectation that I or somebody else will choose go back to a dictionary that we both commonly reference? How do you deal with it? If Islam is anything to anyone or everything to everyone, what is Islam? What's left?
I think if we go back to the first question that asked the Prophet for me about Islam, and the Prophet gave a succinct answer of naming the 5 pillars. If someone's recognizing those 5 pillars, there are actions like the hadith that Ahmed is quoting here. They're choosing actions that don't necessarily take you outside of the fold of Islam. For instance, if I
claim to be Muslim, and then I get up and say, oh, you should pray to an idol. Obviously, that is negating the Shahada, which is there's no God but Allah. That's like a main tenet. But if I get up and you see me drinking the next day, that makes me sinful, but that it doesn't take me outside of the fold of Islam. That just makes me sinful.
Very powerful example. For time, let me try to bring some of this together and then ask you. I appreciate there's others who want to share points, but just for time, let me try to add a couple of things and then tell me if we're missing something or additional questions. This is an issue of difference among Islamic sects and different scholars, but there is a core that represents Islamic Sunni orthodoxy, which is what I'm going to talk about now, inshallah. I would say that the overwhelming majority of scholars of this ummah's history would disagree both with Ahmad and with Bid'ah. That they are both wrong. Let me explain why. When I say wrong, again, I'm identifying for you the dictionary that I'm coming back to. And this could be a whole class. Those of you that studied with us last year and the year before, you're probably flashing in your mind elements of usul al-aqidah or usul al-fiqh that we talked about, right? And if you're confused or we talk about this more, no problem, but it's important that you understand this. The judgment and the responsibility for the judgment is yours. But you have to understand this. It's 1,400 years of people applying their scholarship. And whatever opinion you adopt, you have to understand the tradition, the rich tradition that we belong to. And so definitely, Muslims have throughout history practiced great caution in judging the outcome of another person. Because in Islam, you cannot guarantee your own salvation. So the premier and best people of this tradition, for example, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, says, if one of my feet were to enter Jannah, then I would not feel secure until the other one followed. Umar ibn al-Khattab was after the companion. He kept approaching him and begging him. The companion that the Prophet ﷺ gave information about the hypocrites of Medina. But he did so because of fear of his name was on it, right? Others among our pious predecessors say that if it was said on the Day of Judgment, all of people will enter Jannah except one, I would fear that I am that one, and they're among the best of people. So that humility is very well established, and it should be pointed out that it is distinct from many other religious traditions. I have a lot of beef with this personally. People that preach religion, promising, for example, wealth and prosperity in dunya, or that they have the exclusive keys to Jannah, and a lot of times it's the poor and oppressed that are caught up with this. Comparatively, much of Islamic scholarship has been better than some of the clergy in other religions in this regard. There has been a hesitation, except by some fringe and minority sects and groups, of declaring all people lost except for a group and so on. In fact, even Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is a bunch of people that disagree about a ton of stuff. But the core is recognized, and that's enough. People hope and expect that others are people of Jannah, although they disagree about a lot of issues and things. That being said, there's a lot of rights and responsibilities that require an understanding of who's in the fold of Islam and who isn't, if you are going to adhere to Islamic norms. Let me clarify that with an example. It's a free country. If any of you live in North Carolina and you're 18, you can walk downtown and get married to whoever you want, and you don't have to ask my permission or anybody else's permission, or your parents for that matter. That's the law of this land. So don't confuse things. Don't be like, oh my God, they're restricting us and so on. No, if you choose to follow Islamic norms and practices, then the family is a part of that journey, even if the husband and wife have freedom to choose and cannot be compelled. That there are conditions that are established for that marriage. So somebody walks up and says, we want you to do our nikah according to these conditions, then we mediate that according to what they've asked for. Somebody comes and asks for Islamic advice, our way is the way of the prophets. This is our understanding of the deen. Wallahi, you want to go? Ask somebody else. Go ask somebody else. You want to take this advice, throw it out the window? What am I going to do? Run after you? Seriously, it's advice, non-binding advice, right? Ultimately, you're accountable before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not a law enforcement agency. But for people it come if Islam means anything to anybody? Then what are you asking about? We have to have a dictionary. We have to have a means of understanding that dictionary. And based on that, again, all people, except for criminals and so on, extreme cases, but in general, Muslim and non-Muslim, right to life, right to leave their property alone, right to respect their family, all those big human rights are universal. But Islamic norms, there are some minor differences on inheritance, on marriage and so on, where people need to know, are you Muslim or not? Right? Now, the habit of Islamic scholarship has been to establish a very low common denominator. There are actually books written about the backflip legal excuses that people come up with to avoid applying an Islamic rule. Right? And this is studied in Western law now. Western law is much less flexible on this than Islamic law was. So the hadd, or the punishment for zina, for example, is nearly impossible to meet the requirements. You need 4 people that witness an actual intimate act without a shred of doubt and not under a blanket. Right? Not at that level. I'm sorry to be explicit, but that's what you have to do. That's nearly impossible, which is why almost everybody before the nonsense of our times were confessions. Right? Similarly, the suspension of the hadd of thievery, so many examples about these excuses, but ultimately, a basic minimum of the recognition of Islamic practice, even if you come up way short in doing it, was considered to be defining the bounds of the fold of Islam. So if a person drinks, they're not outside the fold of Islam. Person does not get up for Fajr on time, they're not. A person that publicly rejects the tenets of Islam, and perhaps because of the importance of prayer, does not pray habitually and rejects the authority of prayer, that level would take you out of Islam. Be stealing and drinking and making mistakes, but say, I'm weak, I'm sorry, I'm just no good, still considered a Muslim. Right? So, how do we understand this? I'm summarizing a longer discussion for Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Islam and Iman are 2 terms. When they are separate, they mean the same thing. When they come together, they describe different complementary things. So when I say, hey, y'all Muslims, right? Y'all Muslims, what does that mean? Do you believe in Allah and the angels and so on? You believe the basics of Islam, and at least try to pray or recognize that you should do this stuff. Muslim. You get what I'm saying? So Islam by itself means the practice and the belief. Everything. I say, are you all believers? What does it mean? Same thing. You believe in Allah and so on by itself. When we talk about Islam and Iman, like in this hadith when they're together, Islam talks about the outward practice. Iman talks about the inward state of mind and heart. Also, قالت الأعراب آمنا. The Bedouin Arabs claimed we believe. This is in the Quran. Say you have not believed, but rather say, as قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. Say rather we have submitted, and still when faith will permeate your hearts. Does that mean that they're kuffar? No, it does not. Okay? It's used because they're coming together. Here it's used in the sense of levels. Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Muslim, good Muslim, super Muslim. You get what I'm saying? Now, Ibn Hajar is a long discussion of this with proofs and everything. Again, I don't want to overwhelm this, but this is proved with, or evidence with a lot of these verses and so on. But when we apply those tools to this, a more proper translation is that your faith, none of you truly believes or completely believes until you love for yourself what love for your brother, what you love for yourself. Meaning that a Muslim who's doing their basics, or at least trying, and not rejecting the authority of God and not saying, nah, you don't gotta make hajj, you know what I mean? Like, that person is Muslim. They're they're not a complete believer until they're establishing more of what needs to be done, right? But if we say, is that person a believer? Yeah, believer. Because I'm saying it by itself, right? Believe in Allah and soul. If we're talking about levels, right? In the sense of levels, again here, this is because this is hadith is talking in the sense of levels, right? That many ulama understand that in that moment, the meaning of Iman is not permeating their being, otherwise it would stop them from what they're doing. They're not being conscious of being a complete believer at that time, otherwise they'd be like, whoa, gotta stop. But does it mean that they're outside of the fold? According to the overwhelming 90-something plus percent of Muslim scholars, absolutely, absolutely not. Exceptions like the Khawarij, who killed a lot of people, and others. You know, not the overwhelming majority of the Ummah understood this hadith in that manner. Okay? Yes? Question?
To some extent, I totally agree with everything you said. We are qualifying the hadith based on a broader understanding of Islamic principles and the opinions of majority of moral ulama. But I'm struggling with the fact that the hadith is very straightforward. The language is very simple. The hadith does not say none of you completely believe. It's straightforwardly said believe. So while I understand how we would interpret it, I'm struggling with how to respond to Ahmad when he brings that very simple.
So I am seeking in this case study to extend our understanding of the hadith, right? And so the companions, when they heard this hadith, they did not immediately say, oh, who's a believer or not believer. But these ahadith, especially in generations after the companions, caused splits and differences among some groups that use them for hyper-takfir. And today, still in the dark corners of the internet, you'll see people that just have this need to like kick people out. And sadly, many Muslims responding to this extreme go to the opposite extreme, right? Which could at the end dilute Islam so it means everything to anyone, that there's no core left, right? And in that sense, there are books now published, for example, by a Muslim atheist. Again, it's a free country, it's published. But this is talking about like culturally Muslim, but I reject God. Islam is not a culture in the understanding of 99+% of the Ummah. You see what I'm saying? So it's a free country, you want to not believe in God, don't believe in God. I mean, the Quran doesn't say compel them to believe in God, but that would not, in any point in Islamic history, be understood as a manifestation of Islam. But a person, the Prophet ﷺ was presented with an alcoholic man who kept falling in the same thing. What did he say? He said, don't help shaitan against your brother. He loves Allah and His Messenger, right? So he recognized the good in this man's heart. So could you be an alcoholic Muslim? Sure. Could you be a Muslim that struggles with something else? Sure. But at no point in the Ummah's history, the Muslim Ummah, has it been understood that I can be Muslim, wear a turban and do my thing, but I don't believe that God exists. That would be understood to be outside the fold. Question?
I just remembered also there was, I believe it might have been Umar, right? When he was asked about Khawarij. And his response to that question was, there are brothers who transgressed against us. So basically, like, he accepted them as Muslims, but based on their belief, but maybe just they're kind of going against the grain.
There's a lot of detail, and that will be covered in a class on Aqidah or sects. Also, these things have to have historical context, and so those groups shift and change positions over time. So even a great scholarly statement at one point may change based on the changes of the group. It's an important point. It would be a point in a more detailed discussion. But there's been a lot of scholarly effort essentially to draw this line encompassing most people possible, but still having a clear definition of what Islam is and what Islam is not. That's broadly acceptable. Question?
Can you display the next slide again with the circles? And this is more of a comment of what I'm gathering. If the phrase like Islam, where you wrote practice, could be believe, and Iman is really faith. So they're interchangeable, but they're not the same.
That's correct. So often, well, when they're used separately, they're typically seen as interchangeable. When they're used together, they're understood to be complementary descriptions. One is a state of mind and creed and belief and state of mind, and the other is the outward practice that confirms that belief. So they're linked, but they're separate. But definitely when they're used separately, I consider this a gathering of Muslims, I consider this a gathering of believers, mu'mineen. You see what I'm saying? When they're used separately.
I'm not sure whether this is within the scope of the class, but I'm going to ask anyway. So what happens if you have established that this person denies one of the tenets of, our faith, which, is really required to be a Muslim? He doesn't believe in any of that. What do you do then? As a regular Muslim, what do you do then?
In a sense, there's some overlap with how human disputes will get litigated here, right? And so, in North Carolina law, if two people marry, and for example, in this example, the wife finds out that the man misled her and their relatives, for example, or did not disclose a previous marriage on the form, she would go to a judge, and that judge would fact find and verify. It's not based on what she says or he says. You got to find the evidence, and if it's a justified thing, that judge can annul the marriage, not just divorce, but cancel it because she's been wronged, and he can award damages. Similarly, in these kind of property cases and marriage cases, if a person was misleading or wrong, this happens now, for example, where a person professes faith to get married. A very practical and sad example is some people will profess faith to get married, and then when they're in the marriage, there's drugs and severe abuse and so on that were totally undisclosed and unknown before. So it's just a show. And often the wrong parties are women. So these women will approach, for example, this masjid or others seeking help. How do we litigate? That person has been wronged, potentially, but there also has to be a fact-finding process so that people don't have the opportunity to lie harmlessly. If a person's at home and believes or doesn't believe and doesn't talk to anybody, how would you know, right? There's no onus for a person to go jump a fence and figure it out. But if a person's practice ends up harming another person, the vast majority of cases brought before judges, then as now, are civil cases, disputes between two private parties. Right? I want to finish, we'll take two more questions.
So I just wanted to ask you, is it not safe to say that, according to this hadith, Ep2, and the one that you just showed, that, in a lot of this hadith, the Prophet is actually talking about Iman. And even in the Quran, Allah was talking about Iman, like the verse that you just quoted. So to say that the people, the Prophet, is already talking to Muslims. We know these people are already Muslims. There's not even a question about that. So that's why the Prophet is talking about the Iman of these people. He's not actually talking about Islam. Because if we're talking about Iman to someone, that is not very Muslim. As a matter of fact, I heard yesterday that another name for hadith number 2 that we're learning is also called hadith marat bidi, meaning we will not be talking about the level of Islam. So we will not be talking to you about Iman if you're not Muslim. This is the reason why the hadith start from Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So the Prophet was talking about like you cannot believe. Even in many hadith he said you can believe or you cannot truly believe. If you believe in Allah or the Yawm al-Akhir, or you come die for
yes.
Take care of your guests or something like that. So if we start saying all of this, anything that talks about Iman is actually talking to Muslims. I think this is safe to make that into.
I would describe it as both. So this hadith both has a classification of the dimensions of Islam and also has a description of levels of Islam. And based on the context in which these terms are used, they can imply one or both or same meanings or different complementary. Right? And so, just to close, and I'll stay around if there's questions. So again, this case study is not limited to this hadith. We're pushing you to synthesize. I appreciate your courage. This is not an easy question. If you have other questions, we can do it. But again, talking about these dimensions, Prophet ﷺ talked about, summarize some key lessons, inshallah, that we learned today. Number one, to be reliable and understand the surroundings. This is taken from the sharp wit and the understanding of Umar ibn al-Khattab and his observations. Number two, to have adab and manners and etiquette in all that we do. This is taken from every party. The way the Prophet ﷺ dealt with Angel Jibreel, his patience, the way Angel Jibreel was appearing, the way the narrator sat and waited and listened. Number 3, to live a balanced lifestyle in all that we do. Okay? So this hadith is talking about outward practice, about beliefs and inward state of mind, about spiritual refinement, right? This is the part about, tell me about ihsan. Ihsan literally means to beautify. And the most beautiful thing you can bring into the world is virtue, is goodness. So the Prophet ﷺ says that you worship Allah as if you see Him. Know that if you don't, He is watching you. Muraqabah. So the ihsan literally means to beautify, or we can describe it as excellence. And the most beautiful thing that can be brought out into the world is virtue and good. So that level, that high level of ihsan, doing it in all that we do, and guiding it and striving for that level, imagine what our prayer would look like if we knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is right there watching. So if we could see Allah like we would see Him on the day of Judgment or in Jannah. Imagine what our exchanges would look like with our spouses and our children and our brothers and sisters. Imagine how studious we would be. Or would we cram to the last second, the night before the exam, right? All of these things impacted by an ihsan. And the final one, and I'll just close with this, we'll reinforce it later, is to understand the limits of our knowledge. Understand the limits of our knowledge. At the very end of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was asked by Angel Jibreel, tell me about the hour. The Prophet ﷺ said, the one being questioned is not more knowledgeable than the one asking. This is a very eloquent way of saying that nobody knows but Allah. The time of the Day of Judgment is from the things that Allah has not given knowledge of any messenger, any angel, any creation. Inna Allah indahu ilmu sa'a. In the Quran, Allah alone has knowledge of the hour. And the Prophet ﷺ himself was not shy to recognize the limits of his knowledge. So what about us? When Malik says half of knowledge is to say, I don't know. Right? The importance of saying, I don't know. Then, Angel Jibreel said, then tell me about its signs. He said that the slave girl would give birth to her mother. This has multiple interpretations. Among them, the flipping of the social order. The high becomes low, low becomes high, good becomes evil, evil becomes good. Everything is flipped upside down. And so they're saying that the interpretation is that the girl gives birth to her mother. And another interpretation is the breakdown of the respect in the family structure. The children will become rebellious and disrespectful against their parents. And this is seen even by Confucian philosophy and by many thinkers as the ultimate sign of destruction of the societal order, because the family is the building block of society. Obviously, it goes without saying that this sign is considered fulfilled in our times where children do things to parents would have been unimaginable in history. And then the summary of what follows, that you see these poor, destitute, barefoot people competing and building high buildings. SubhanAllah, this is one of the most terrifying aspects of this hadith, because I remember as a younger student listening to lectures where the sheikh would say, Allah knows what this means. People did not know what this could potentially mean. They didn't have a picture in their minds. In just the last couple of years, this is really terrifying. In the last couple of years, many people understanding the general gist of the hadith being that there are people that are very poor, shepherds, people that don't have a lot of wealth, overwhelmingly, all of a sudden have plenty and have the luxury of building the highest building in the city can build it. Many people understand this to be the sudden wealth that came to many Muslim majority peoples within the last 100 years. And now you see some of the tallest buildings of the world built in the Muslim majority world among people whose grandfathers and great-grandfathers were very simple, people without much wealth at all, overwhelming. So a lot of people can And then, and I apologize for going a couple minutes over, we'll close here. Finally, Umar ibn Khattab closes. This is really awesome, by the way. I don't know about you, but if I was there, the moment that man walked out, I'd be like, who was that? Like, how could you control yourself? But this was the nature of the Sahaba. They recognized the importance of the questioning, but they did not ask the Prophet ﷺ unnecessary questions. So actually, this man left and Umar ibn Khattab stayed for a time, in some interpretations, even 3 days. And when the Prophet ﷺ came to him, he said, do you know who this questioner was? And Umar ibn Khattab, you see this great humility here. He says, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, indeed, he is Jibreel. He has come to teach you your religion. So this last piece, many lessons, preparation for the Day of Judgment, importance of preparing for it rather than being fixated. Wallahi, it's one of the most embarrassing things about, some American preachers. It's a bigger concentration of evangelical Christians in America than anywhere else in the world. And some people make a money and a career off of doomsday prophecies and so on, right? In our deen, it is unacceptable to extract rulings from a hadith about the signs of the Day of Judgment. Don't start a petition telling some government, don't build towers, otherwise you bring the Day of Judgment. Allah is coming. You know what I mean? It's a sign of the end of times that this sudden wealth comes. So we don't extract rulings from it, fiqh rulings, but we extract lessons. And in fact, many scholars consider all or the overwhelming majority of signs, of the minor signs of the Day of Judgment, as having been fulfilled and are just waiting for the first major signs to begin. Prophet ﷺ says, I was sent in the Day of Judgment like these two fingers. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us, increase us, inshallah. For those of you that want an opportunity to serve downstairs, inshallah, there's a collection for those in need from Hurricane Florence. If you want to go volunteer, help out, carry some stuff, post some cards, whatever you're able to do. And I'll stick around, inshallah, for a few minutes. Any questions?
Neighbor, what are you gonna help?